Picture this. You're sitting in a room full of powerful military officers, each one decorated with years of service and countless battles under their belt. The air is thick with testosterone and skepticism. Then, a young woman walks in, claiming she can do something that seems absolutely impossible. The colonel in charge doesn't just doubt her. He laughs out loud, his voice echoing through the room like a thunderclap of disbelief. But what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about underestimating people. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary stories begin with the most ordinary-looking person walking into a room where they clearly don't belong. This isn't just another story about proving someone wrong. This is about the moment when laughter dies in someone's throat, when certainty crumbles like a house of cards, and when the impossible becomes undeniably real. It's about the day a colonel learned that his biggest mistake wasn't doubting what someone could do. It was laughing about it. What could a young woman possibly reveal that would silence an entire room of seasoned military veterans? What secret could she hold that would turn mockery into stunned silence? The answer will leave you speechless, just like it left that colonel. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Harrison as Sarah Chun stepped out of the government sedan. At 28, she looked more like a college professor than someone who had been summoned to one of the most secure military installations in the country. Her simple black suit and modest briefcase seemed almost comical next to the imposing concrete walls and armed guards that surrounded her. Sarah had been expecting this day for 3 years, ever since she first submitted her classified proposal to the Department of Defense. What she hadn't expected was the wall of skepticism that greeted her the moment she walked through those steel doors. The military had a way of making civilians feel small, and today was no exception. Colonel James Morrison had been running psychological operations at Fort Harrison for over 2 decades. He had seen every type of consultant, contractor, and so-called expert walk through his doors. Most of them were charlatans trying to sell snake oil to the government. Others were brilliant theorists who had never stepped foot outside a laboratory. Very few impressed him, and absolutely none had ever made him reconsider what he thought was possible. When Morrison first read Sarah's file, he almost threw it in the trash. The proposal was ridiculous. The claims were outlandish. But the credentials backing it up were impossible to ignore. 3 PhD degrees from MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. Published research in neuroscience, quantum physics, and cognitive psychology. Patents in technologies that most people couldn't even pronounce. And backing from some of the most respected scientists in the country. Still, Morrison remained skeptical. Academic brilliance didn't translate to real-world results, especially in his world where lives hung in the balance. He had agreed to this meeting as a formality, nothing more. 1 hour to listen to another academic pipe dream. Then he could get back to real work. Sarah was escorted through a maze of corridors by a stone-faced sergeant who clearly had better things to do. The walls were lined with photographs of past commanding officers, their stern faces seeming to judge her as she passed. She could feel the weight of their expectations, the assumption that she would fail to deliver on whatever promises had brought her here. The briefing room was exactly what Sarah had imagined. A long conference table surrounded by chairs that had seen countless meetings about countless military operations. Maps covered one wall, showing deployments across 3 continents. On another wall hung commendations and unit patches, each one representing years of service and sacrifice. Morrison was already seated at the head of the table when Sarah entered. He didn't stand up, didn't offer a handshake, just gestured toward a chair with the same enthusiasm he might show a mosquito. 2 other officers flanked him, Major Patricia Reeves, the base's intelligence officer, and Captain David Kumar, who specialized in emerging technologies. The silence stretched for several seconds as Morrison studied Sarah, like she was a puzzle he was already tired of solving. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been challenged and expected never to be. Ms. Chun, he began, deliberately avoiding any academic titles. I'll be honest with you. I've read your proposal twice, and I still don't understand what exactly you think you can do for us. You claim to have developed some kind of technology that can... He paused to consult his notes, his tone making it clear he thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Extract and transfer human memories with perfect accuracy. Is that correct? Sarah nodded calmly, used to this type of reception. That's correct, Colonel. My team has successfully developed a non-invasive neural interface that can read, store, and transfer memories between individuals with unprecedented precision. Morrison's eyebrows shot up, and Major Reeves actually snorted with amusement. Captain Kumar, the youngest of the three, tried to maintain a professional expression, but couldn't quite hide his skepticism. Ms. Chun, Morrison continued, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he usually reserved for new recruits. I've been in this business for 23 years. I've seen every type of interrogation technique, every form of information extraction known to man. What you're describing sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. Sarah remained perfectly composed, her hands folded neatly on the table. She had heard this speech before from other military officials, from other skeptics who couldn't see beyond their own limited experience. Colonel, I understand your skepticism. What I'm proposing does challenge conventional understanding of neurotechnology. However, I can assure you that the science is solid, the testing has been extensive, and the results speak for themselves. Morrison leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. This was the part he enjoyed most about these meetings. The moment when he got to deflate the oversized egos of people who thought they were smarter than everyone else in the room. The results, he repeated, drawing out the words. Tell me, Ms. Chun, exactly what results are we talking about? Because according to my understanding of neuroscience, which admittedly isn't extensive, the human brain doesn't work like a computer. You can't just download memories like files from a hard drive. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. A hint of steel beneath the calm exterior. You're absolutely right, Colonel. The brain isn't a computer. It's far more complex, which is exactly why this breakthrough took us 15 years to achieve. Major Reeves decided to join the conversation, her tone even more dismissive than Morrison's. Even if what you're claiming was theoretically possible, which most experts would dispute, the practical applications would be limited. Memory is unreliable. People forget things. They change details. They convince themselves things happened differently than they actually did. Sarah turned her attention to the Major, her voice remaining steady and professional. Actually, Major, that's one of the most exciting aspects of our technology. We're not extracting what people think they remember. We're accessing the raw neural data from the moment of encoding. The brain stores everything, even details the conscious mind doesn't register or later discards. Captain Kumar finally spoke up, his curiosity getting the better of his skepticism. Even if that were true, how would you prove it? How would we know if the memories you extracted were accurate or just elaborate fabrications? It was a fair question, and Sarah appreciated that at least one person in the room was thinking scientifically rather than just dismissing her work outright. An excellent question, Captain. Verification is built into our process. We can cross-reference extracted memories with physical evidence, security footage, other witness accounts. In our testing, we've achieved a 99.7% accuracy rate in verifiable details. Morrison had heard enough. He pushed his chair back from the table and stood up, his movement sharp and dismissive. Miss Chun, I'm going to stop you right there. I don't know what kind of game you're playing or who you think you're fooling, but this conversation has moved firmly into the realm of fantasy. He walked over to the wall of commendations, his back to Sarah, as he continued. I've spent my career dealing with reality. Real operations, real intelligence, real consequences when things go wrong. What you're describing isn't just improbable, it's impossible. Memory transfer? Perfect neural recording? These are the dreams of science fiction writers, not serious military technology. Sarah remained seated, her composure unshaken by Morrison's theatrical dismissal. She had been in this situation before, though rarely with someone quite so condescending. Colonel, I understand your skepticism. Revolutionary technology often seems impossible until it becomes reality. Morrison turned back to face her, his expression hardening. Revolutionary technology? Ms. Chun, I've seen revolutionary technology. Night vision, satellite communications, drone warfare. These were all revolutionary, but they were based on solid scientific principles that could be demonstrated and verified. What you're proposing violates everything we know about how the brain works. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Major Reeves and Captain Kumar watched the exchange like spectators at a tennis match, waiting to see who would make the next move. Sarah sat perfectly still, her dark eyes focused on Morrison with an intensity that hadn't been there before. Colonel, she said finally, her voice quiet but carrying a new edge, You're absolutely right that what I'm describing challenges conventional understanding. But conventional understanding has been wrong before. 50 years ago, landing on the moon was considered impossible. 100 years ago, powered flight was considered impossible. The history of human progress is written by people who refuse to accept the limitations others tried to impose on them. Morrison's smile returned, but this time it was colder, more predatory. He was about to deliver the killing blow to this academic's delusions of grandeur. Ms. Chun, there's a difference between challenging limitations and ignoring reality. What you're claiming isn't just revolutionary, it's fantasy. And, frankly, I'm disappointed that someone with your credentials would waste our time with something so obviously impossible. He walked back to the table, placing his hands flat on the surface as he leaned towards Sarah. Let me be very clear about something. This is the United States military, not some university research lab where you can publish theoretical papers about imaginary technologies. We deal in facts, not fiction. We use proven methods, not pipe dreams. Sarah's composure finally cracked just slightly. A flash of something crossed her face, there, and gone so quickly that only Morrison caught it. For just a moment, she looked less like a nervous academic, and more like someone who had been severely underestimated. Colonel Morrison, she said, her voice still calm, but with an undertone that made both Major Reeves and Captain Kumar sit up straighter, I appreciate your position, and I understand your skepticism. But I think you're making an assumption that could prove to be very costly. Morrison's smile broadened. This was exactly the kind of response he expected from these academic types when their theories were challenged. Threats and bluster to cover up the fact that they had nothing substantial to offer. And what assumption is that, Miss Chun? He asked, his voice dripping with mock curiosity. Sarah stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. For the first time since entering the room, she looked directly into Morrison's eyes without wavering. You're assuming that I'm here to convince you that this technology exists. But, Colonel, I'm not here to prove anything to you. She reached for her briefcase, her movements unhurried despite the growing tension in the room. I'm here because 3 days ago, Sergeant Michael Torres was captured by enemy forces while conducting a reconnaissance mission in Afghanistan. According to your reports, he was carrying classified information that could compromise the safety of American operatives across the Middle East. Morrison's smile faltered slightly. Torres's capture was classified information known only to a handful of people with the highest security clearances. How could this civilian possibly know about it? Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Your intelligence suggests that Sergeant Torres was tortured before his death, and that he may have revealed the locations of 3 safe houses and the identities of 5 undercover operatives. Is that correct? The room had gone completely silent. Morrison's face had lost all trace of amusement, replaced by a growing concern about security breaches and classified information being discussed by someone who shouldn't have access to it. MS. Chun, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger, I don't know how you came by that information, but discussing classified operations is a serious federal crime. Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the room. It wasn't a friendly smile, but rather the expression of someone who was about to reveal a trump card that no one else knew existed. You're absolutely right, Colonel, which is why I'm not discussing classified operations. She opened her briefcase and removed a single photograph, placing it on the table where all 3 officers could see it. I'm discussing Sergeant Torres's memories. The photograph showed a young man in military fatigues, his face bearing the unmistakable marks of recent trauma. But his eyes were alert, focused, very much alive. Morrison's face went completely white as he recognized the impossibility of what he was seeing. That photograph was taken yesterday morning, Colonel, 36 hours after Sergeant Torres was officially declared dead. Because while his body may have died in that Afghan compound, his memories are very much alive. Sarah's voice was now steady and confident, with no trace of the nervous academic who had entered the room an hour earlier. That's impossible, Morrison whispered, but even as he said it, he was studying the photograph with the trained eye of someone who had seen enough classified material to recognize authenticity when he saw it. Sarah reached back into her briefcase and removed a thick folder, placing it next to the photograph. This contains everything Sergeant Torres experienced during his final mission. Every conversation, every piece of intelligence he gathered, every detail of his capture and interrogation. More importantly, It contains information he gathered that never made it into any official reports because he died before he could deliver it. The silence stretched on as Morrison stared at the materials on the table. Major Reeves and Captain Kumar looked like they had been struck by lightning, their skepticism replaced by a growing awareness that they were witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. Finally, Morrison found his voice. Ow! The single word carried all the weight of his shattered certainty, his collapsed worldview, his sudden understanding that everything he thought he knew about the limits of technology had just been proven wrong. Sarah's smile softened slightly, but her eyes remained steel. The same way I know that you have a scar on your left shoulder from shrapnel in Iraq, Colonel. The same way I know that Major Reeves has been having trouble sleeping since her divorce was finalized last month. The same way I know that Captain Kumar has been questioning whether he chose the right career path, ever since he was passed over for promotion 6 months ago. The color drained from all three faces as Sarah continued, her voice now carrying an authority that commanded absolute attention. You see, gentlemen and lady, you've all been in contact with someone whose memories I've already accessed. Someone who knew all of your personal details, your professional concerns, your private thoughts that you shared in confidence. Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his shoulder, where underneath his uniform was indeed a scar from an IED explosion in Fallujah. Major Reeves looked sick, realizing that someone had betrayed confidences she thought were secure. Captain Kumar simply stared at the table, processing the implications of what he was hearing. Sarah continued, her revelation building momentum like a gathering storm. The question you should be asking isn't whether my technology works, Colonel. The question is, how long have I been using it? And what else do I know that you think is secret? The air in the briefing room had become thick with tension. Colonel Morrison found himself in uncharted territory, facing a situation that his 23 years of military experience hadn't prepared him for. He was a man who prided himself on being in control, on knowing more than anyone else in the room, on never being caught off guard. Sarah Chun had shattered all of that in the span of 5 minutes. Morrison's mind raced as he tried to process what he had just heard. The details Sarah had mentioned were accurate, but they were also highly classified. His scar from Iraq was known only to his medical files and a few close friends. Major Reeves's divorce was personal information that she kept strictly separated from her professional life. Captain Kumar's career concerns had been shared only in confidence during private counseling sessions. Who? Morrison's voice came out as a harsh whisper. Who have you been accessing? Sarah's expression remained calm, but there was a new energy in her demeanor. The nervous academic facade had completely disappeared, replaced by someone who clearly understood the power she wielded. That's not the right question, Colonel. The right question is why I'm here today, in this room, with you three specifically. She moved around the table slowly, her footsteps echoing in the silent room. You see, this meeting isn't happening by chance. You weren't selected randomly to evaluate my technology. Each of you was chosen very carefully based on specific criteria that go far beyond your job descriptions or security clearances. Major Reeves found her voice first, though it trembled slightly. What kind of criteria? Sarah stopped beside a wall map showing global military deployments. Her finger traced the outline of several countries as she spoke. Tell me, Major, what do you remember about Operation Silent Thunder? Reeves's face went pale. Operation Silent Thunder was a classified mission from 3 years ago, one that had gone disastrously wrong. 6 operatives had died, and the official reports had been buried so deep that even discussing it could end careers. I don't know what you're talking about. Reeves lied, but her voice betrayed her. Sarah smiled sadly. Major, lying to me is pointless. I know that you were the intelligence officer who provided the faulty reconnaissance data that led to those deaths. I know that you've been carrying the guilt ever since, and I know that you've been seeing a therapist to deal with the nightmares. Reeves stood up abruptly, her chair clattering behind her. How could you possibly know that? The mission files are classified at the highest levels, and my medical records are sealed. Sarah turned back to face the 3 officers, her expression gentle but unyielding. Because, Major, I've been inside the memories of Colonel Marcus Webb, the mission commander who died that day. His final thoughts, his last moments, his understanding of what went wrong. It's all preserved in his neural patterns, extracted before his brain activity ceased completely. The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison felt like he was drowning in implications he couldn't fully grasp. If Sarah could truly access the memories of dead soldiers, the ramifications for military intelligence were staggering. But the personal cost, the violation of privacy, the ethical implications, they were almost too overwhelming to consider. Captain Kumar finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's monstrous." Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "Is it, Captain? More monstrous than letting Colonel Webb's sacrifice be meaningless? More monstrous than allowing the same intelligence failures to happen again?" Webb's memories contained crucial information about enemy positions and tactics that could save lives in future operations. Are those memories less valuable because the man who experienced them is dead? She walked back to her briefcase and removed another folder, this one thicker than the first. Colonel Webb's final mission report, based on his extracted memories, identified 17 enemy positions that weren't in any official intelligence. It revealed a network of informants that we didn't know existed, and it explained exactly why the operation failed, information that could prevent similar disasters in the future. Morrison's hands were shaking slightly as he reached for the folder. The implications were staggering, but so were the possibilities. If this technology was real, if it could truly extract memories from deceased soldiers, it could revolutionize military intelligence. But even as part of his mind began calculating the strategic advantages, another part recoiled from the ethical implications. "The families," he said quietly. "Do they know? Did Colonel Webb consent to this?" Sarah's expression softened. Colonel Webb signed a classified agreement 2 years before his death as part of an experimental program. He understood the risks and the potential benefits. His wife receives a substantial monthly payment, and his children's college educations are fully funded. He believed, as I do, that his memories could serve his country even after his death. She moved to the window, looking out at the base where hundreds of soldiers went about their daily routines, unaware that their entire understanding of death and memory was being challenged in this room. "But this isn't just about accessing the memories of the dead, Colonel. That's just one application of the technology." Morrison looked up from a folder he had been studying. "What do you mean?" Sarah turned back to face them, and for the first time, they could see genuine excitement in her eyes. Living subjects can also have their memories accessed, copied, and even temporarily transferred to others. Imagine being able to share the experiences of your most skilled soldiers with new recruits. Imagine allowing a commanding officer to literally see through the eyes of every soldier under their command. Captain Kumar's skepticism was warring with his fascination. Even if that were possible, the security risks would be enormous. If enemies could access our soldiers' memories. Sarah nodded approvingly. "An excellent concern, Captain, which is why the technology includes multiple layers of protection. Memories can only be accessed with biometric authentication from a subject. The extraction process requires specialized equipment that takes weeks to calibrate. And, most importantly, the memories themselves are encrypted using quantum protocols that would take centuries to break with current technology." She reached into her briefcase once more and removed a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a medical scanner. "This is the portable extraction unit. It's about the size of a tablet, but it contains processing power that rivals most supercomputers. The real breakthrough isn't just in reading memories. It's in interpreting and organizing them in ways that make them useful." Major Reeves had been studying the photographs and documents Sarah had provided, and she looked up with a mixture of awe and horror. This level of detail, it's like having a perfect recording of someone's entire experience. Their thoughts, their emotions, their physical sensations, everything. Sarah smiled grimly. "Exactly. Which brings us to why you three were specifically chosen for this demonstration." She walked back to the table and sat down, her posture relaxed but her eyes intense. "Each of you has access to different types of classified information. Each of you has different security clearances and operational experiences. And each of you has personal secrets that you believe are absolutely secure." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying that you've accessed our memories without our knowledge or consent?" Sarah shook her head. "No, Kenneth. I'm saying that I've accessed the memories of people who have interacted with you. People you trust, people you've confided in, people whose minds hold fragments of your lives and your secrets." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "The question is, how many of your trusted colleagues, friends, and family members have been in contact with my team over the past 6 months?" The room fell silent again as each of the three officers mentally reviewed their recent interactions, trying to identify possible security breaches. The paranoia was immediate and overwhelming. If Sarah could access memories from anyone they had spoken to, then no conversation, no secret, no private moment was truly safe. Captain Kumar was the first to voice what they were all thinking. This is psychological warfare on a scale we've never imagined. If our enemies developed this technology, Sarah's expression grew serious. Captain, our enemies aren't developing this technology. They already have it. She stood up and moved to a wall map, pointing to several locations in Eastern Europe and Asia. Intelligence suggests that at least 3 hostile nations have been working on similar neural interface projects for the past decade. The difference is that their methods are invasive, often fatal, and far less precise than ours. She traced her finger along several conflict zones marked on the map. We believe that enemy forces have been using crude memory extraction techniques on captured American personnel for at least 2 years. The information they've gathered has been used to compromise several operations and has resulted in the deaths of numerous assets. Morrison's jaw tightened as he processed this information. If enemy forces were already using memory extraction technology, then America's entire approach to intelligence and security was fundamentally flawed. Traditional interrogation resistance training would be useless against direct neural access. "Show us," Morrison said quietly. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry." Morrison stood up and faced her directly. "You've told us what this technology can do. You've shown us documents and photographs that could be fabricated. You've made claims that challenge everything we understand about neuroscience and memory. Now show us. Demonstrate this technology on one of us." Major Reeves and Captain Kumar looked at Morrison with alarm. The idea of allowing this unknown technology to access their minds was terrifying, especially given the sensitive information they all possessed. Sarah studied Morrison's face carefully. "Colonel, I appreciate your directness, but demonstration of this technology requires extensive preparation. The neural mapping alone takes several hours, and the actual extraction process must be conducted in a sterile environment with medical personnel standing by." Morrison's smile was grim. "Then, we have a problem, MS. Chun, because without a demonstration, this entire conversation is meaningless. You could be the most elaborate con artist in history, or you could be offering technology that could change the course of human warfare. Until I see proof that works in real time, with real consequences, you're just another academic with a fascinating theory." Sarah was quiet for several moments, weighing her options. Finally, she reached in her briefcase and removed a different device, smaller than the first but covered with blinking lights and tiny sensors. "There's one demonstration I can perform immediately, but it requires a volunteer who is willing to share a specific memory with everyone in this room." Captain Kumar leaned forward. "What kind of memory?" Sarah's expression became very serious. "A traumatic memory. Something significant enough that its details would be unmistakable, something that only the subject would know, but painful enough that sharing it would require considerable courage." The room fell silent as each of the 3 officers considered what Sarah was asking. Sharing traumatic memories with colleagues was a level of vulnerability that went against every instinct of military training. Major Reeves spoke first. "What exactly would happen? How would we know the memory was authentic and not something you fabricated?" Sarah connected the device to a small projector she removed from her briefcase. "This is a simplified version of the memory sharing technology. It can't extract complete memories like the full system, but it can access and display recent traumatic experiences. The subject wears this neural interface headband, focuses on a specific memory, and the system translates their neural patterns into visual and auditory data that can be projected for others to see." She looked at each of them in turn. The person experiencing the memory relives it completely. Every sensation, every emotion, every detail. The observers see a somewhat filtered version, like watching a movie that was recorded from inside someone's mind. There's no fakery possible because the technology reads the neural patterns directly. Morrison studied the device with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. If this demonstration was real, if Sarah could truly project memories for others to witness, then everything else she had claimed might also be true. "I'll do it," Major Reeves said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. Of the three officers, she had seemed the most skeptical and hostile towards Sarah's claims. Patricia, Morrison said, using her first name for the first time in the meeting, "You don't have to." Reeves shook her head. "Yes, I do. If this technology is real, if our enemies are using it against our people, then we need to understand it completely. And if it's fake, then we need to expose it before it wastes any more of our time or resources." She looked directly at Sarah. "But I want assurances. I want to know exactly what will happen, what safeguards are in place, and what happens to the memory data afterward." Sarah nodded respectfully. "The memory projection lasts only as long as you're wearing the headband. No data is stored by the device. The experience is shared in real time and then disappears completely. Think of it like a live television broadcast. Once it's over, there's no recording." She gestured toward the device. "The neural interface reads only surface thoughts and active memories. I can't access anything you're not actively thinking about. The safeguards are built into the hardware itself. If you experience any distress or want to stop the demonstration, simply removing the headband immediately terminates the connection." Major Reeves took a deep breath and moved toward the chair Sarah had indicated. "What memory should I focus on?" Sarah's expression was gentle but professional. "Something from your military experience that was traumatic but significant. Something that only you witnessed, that had specific details others could verify afterward. The more specific and unique the memory, the more convincing the demonstration will be." Reeves sat down and allowed Sarah to place the neural interface headband around her temples. The device was lighter than she had expected, and the sensors felt cool against her skin. She could feel a slight tingling sensation as the system began scanning her neural patterns. "I'll focus on the convoy attack in Syria," Reeves said quietly. 3 years ago, 2 soldiers died, and I was the only officer who witnessed the entire event." Sarah nodded and activated the projection system. "Remember, Major, you're in complete control. Focus on the memory when you're ready, and remove the headband if you want to stop for any reason." The room darkened as the projector activated, and suddenly, the sterile military briefing room was transformed. They could see through Reeves's eyes as she experienced the memory again, feeling the heat of the desert sun, hearing the rumble of convoy vehicles, tasting the dust that filled the air. Morrison and Kumar watched in stunned silence as Major Reeves's memory played out before them like a high-definition movie. They could see the exact moment when the attack began, hear the specific words shouted by soldiers, witness the precise sequence of events that led to the deaths of 2 American servicemen. But more than just visual and auditory data, they could sense Reeves's emotions during the event: her fear, her desperation to save her soldiers, her grief when she realized they were beyond help. The technology somehow conveyed not just what she saw and heard, but how she felt throughout the experience. After 10 minutes that felt like hours, Reeves removed the headband with shaking hands. The projection immediately disappeared, leaving the 3 officers in stunned silence. Morrison was the first to speak, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Patricia, I had no idea. The reports never mentioned." Reeves wiped tears from her eyes. There were things that couldn't go in the official reports, things that would have endangered other operations if they became public knowledge. She looked at Sarah with a new respect and understanding. This technology, it doesn't just record memories. It captures the complete human experience. The fear, the pain, the impossible choices that soldiers face in combat. All of it preserved with perfect clarity. Sarah nodded solemnly, which is why the ethical implications are so significant and why the military applications are so powerful. Imagine training scenarios where new soldiers could experience real combat through the memories of veterans. Imagine intelligence gathering where captured enemy personnel could have their memories accessed to reveal hidden weapons caches or planned attacks. Captain Kumar was staring at the now-dark projector, his mind reeling with possibilities. But also imagine the potential for abuse. Totalitarian governments could use this technology to monitor the thoughts of their citizens. Enemy forces could extract state secrets from captured personnel. Sarah stood up and began packing away the demonstration equipment. "Captain, those concerns are exactly why the United States needs to take the lead in developing and controlling this technology. The ethical framework, the security protocols, the international treaties governing its use. All of these must be established by nations that understand both its potential and its dangers. Morrison had been studying the documents Sarah had provided throughout the demonstration. Now he looked up at her with a new understanding of who she was and what she represented. You're not just here to demonstrate technology, are you? You're here to recruit us, to bring us into some kind of classified program that's already been in development for years. Sarah smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Colonel, the recruitment happened 3 years ago when each of you was first identified as a candidate for this program. Everything that has happened since then, your assignments, your security clearances, your specific experiences, has been carefully designed to prepare you for this moment. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of manipulation and conspiracy. Each of the 3 officers was mentally reviewing their recent career moves, wondering which decisions had been their own and which had been influenced by forces they hadn't known existed. Major Reeves spoke first, her voice steady despite the emotional toll of the memory sharing. What exactly are you asking us to do? Sarah Chin closed her briefcase with deliberate precision, the soft click echoing in the silent briefing room. She had expected this question, had prepared for this moment for months, but now that it had arrived, she found herself weighing each word carefully. The 3 officers before her represented more than just potential recruits. They were the gateway to either the greatest advancement in military intelligence history or its most dangerous mistake. Major Reeves, Sarah began, her voice taking on a tone that was both professional and deeply personal. What I'm asking is far more complex than simple recruitment. What I'm asking is that you help me prevent a war that could destroy everything we've worked to protect. She moved to the wall map again, but this time her focus was on different regions, areas that hadn't been part of their previous discussion. Her finger traced a path through Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, connecting dots that formed a disturbing pattern. 18 months ago, American intelligence detected unusual neural activity in captured enemy personnel. Soldiers who should have been providing valuable information under interrogation were instead displaying symptoms consistent with severe brain trauma. At first, we assumed it was the result of enhanced torture techniques or new forms of psychological warfare. Colonel Morrison studied the map, his trained eye picking up the strategic significance of the regions Sarah was indicating. These are all areas where we've had intelligence failures in the past year. Sarah nodded grimly. Colonel, they weren't intelligence failures. They were intelligence thefts. Enemy forces have been using crude memory extraction technology to harvest information from captured American personnel, then eliminating the evidence by inducing fatal brain hemorrhages in their victims. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. Captain Kumar felt sick as he processed the implications. You're saying that our people were tortured for their memories and then murdered to cover it up? Sarah's expression was haunted by knowledge she wished she didn't possess. Captain, murder would have been more humane. The technology our enemies are using requires the subject to remain conscious during the entire extraction process. The neural pathways have to be active for the memories to transfer properly. These soldiers experienced every moment of having their minds invaded and stripped bare before their brains finally shut down from the trauma. Major Reeves stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her shoulders tense with barely controlled emotion. The memory-sharing demonstration had left her feeling exposed and vulnerable, but this new information was far worse. The idea that American soldiers were being subjected to mental torture beyond anything in their training manuals was almost too horrible to accept. Morrison's voice was tight with controlled rage. How many of our people have been killed this way? Sarah consulted a tablet she had removed from her briefcase. 47 confirmed cases over the past 18 months. Possibly as many as 73 if you include personnel who died under suspicious circumstances during or shortly after capture. She touched the screen, and a series of photographs appeared. Young faces in military uniforms, each one representing a life lost to technology that shouldn't exist. The youngest was 19. Private Jennifer Martinez, captured during a supply convoy attack in Afghanistan. Her extracted memories revealed the locations of 3 forward operating bases and compromised an entire network of local informants. Morrison's hands clenched into fists as he stared at the photographs. These weren't just statistics or casualties of war. They were his people, soldiers under his ultimate command, men and women who had died in ways their training had never prepared them for. Who else knows about this? Morrison asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's expression grew even more serious. The Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, the CIA director, and exactly 12 other people in the entire government. The information is classified at levels that don't officially exist. Even the president receives only sanitized briefings that reference enhanced interrogation techniques without explaining the actual methods being used. Captain Kumar had been processing the strategic implications of what they were learning, and his conclusion was deeply troubling. If our enemies can extract memories from captured personnel, then our entire approach to operational security is compromised. Every mission, every safe house, every contact, all of it could be exposed through a single captured soldier. Sarah nodded approvingly. Captain, you understand exactly why this meeting is taking place. Traditional counterintelligence training is useless against memory extraction technology. Resistance to interrogation, compartmentalized information, time-delayed intelligence. None of these methods provide any protection against direct neural access. She moved back to the table and spread out a series of technical diagrams that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Brain scans, neural pathway maps, and complex equations filled the pages with information that was both fascinating and terrifying. The technology our enemies are using is crude, but effective. It's based on Soviet-era research into neural manipulation, combined with more recent advances in brain imaging and electrical stimulation. The extraction process is invasive, requires surgical implantation of neural interfaces, and has a mortality rate of nearly 100%. Major Reeves returned to the table, her professional training helping her focus on the tactical implications despite her emotional reaction to the personal cost. What about our own personnel? Are there any safeguards we can implement to protect against this kind of attack? Sarah's smile was grim, but hopeful. Major, that's exactly where our technology offers a potential solution. While our enemies are using invasive techniques that destroy the brain during extraction, we've developed non-invasive methods that can actually protect memories from unauthorized access. She pointed to one of the diagrams showing a brain scan with highlighted neural pathways. Our technology doesn't just extract memories, it can also encrypt them. We can create neural firewalls that protect sensitive information while allowing normal cognitive function to continue. Morrison leaned forward, his strategic mind immediately grasping the implications. You're talking about mental armor. Protecting our soldiers' minds the same way we protect their bodies. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Exactly, Colonel. But the protection has to be installed before capture, and it requires extensive neural mapping and calibration. The process takes approximately 6 weeks and must be repeated every 12 months as the brain's neural pathways naturally change and adapt. Captain Kumar was studying the technical specifications with growing amazement. This level of neural interface technology, how long have you been developing it? Sarah's expression became carefully neutral. Captain, the foundational research began in 1952 as part of a classified program investigating Soviet advances in psychological warfare. What you're seeing today is the result of 70 years of continuous development and testing. The implications of this timeline hit all 3 officers simultaneously. Memory extraction technology had been under development since the early Cold War, which meant that everything they thought they knew about intelligence gathering and national security was based on incomplete information. Morrison's voice was hoarse as he asked the question that was haunting all of them. How many programs like this exist? How much of our military capabilities are based on classified technologies that don't officially exist? Sarah was quiet for several moments before responding. Colonel, that question goes far beyond my security clearance or my need to know. What I can tell you is that this particular program represents one of the most significant advances in military technology since the development of nuclear weapons. She gathered up the technical diagrams and replaced them in her briefcase, but not before Morrison caught a glimpse of other documents that suggested even more advanced technologies in development. The immediate question, Sarah continued, is whether the 3 of you are willing to join a program that will fundamentally change how America conducts intelligence operations. This isn't just about accessing enemy memories or protecting our own personnel. It's about establishing cognitive supremacy in future conflicts. Major Reeves looked up from the notes she had been taking throughout the conversation. What would our roles be in this program? What exactly are you asking us to do? Sarah's expression became very serious as she prepared to reveal the true scope of what they were being recruited for. Major, you would become the head of the Memory Intelligence Division, responsible for developing operational protocols for memory extraction and analysis. Your experience in traditional intelligence gathering, combined with your demonstrated courage in the face of traumatic memories, makes you uniquely qualified for this position. She turned to Captain Kumar. Captain, you would lead the technology integration team, working with our research scientists to develop field-deployable memory extraction and protection systems. Your background in emerging technologies and your understanding of operational requirements make you essential to bridging the gap between laboratory research and battlefield application. Finally, she looked directly at Colonel Morrison. Colonel, you would command the entire Neural Intelligence Command, overseeing all aspects of memory-based operations from strategic planning to field deployment. Your leadership experience and your ability to make difficult decisions under pressure are exactly what this program needs. Morrison studied Sarah's face, looking for any hint of deception or manipulation. And what about oversight? Who do we report to? What prevents this technology from being abused or used against American citizens? Sarah's response was immediate and emphatic. Colonel, the oversight structure for this program is more extensive than anything in the current military hierarchy. Every operation requires approval from a joint committee that includes representatives from a military, intelligence agencies, Justice Department, and Civilian Ethics Board. Every use of the technology is monitored, recorded, and reviewed by independent auditors. She removed another document from her briefcase, this one bearing multiple official seals and signatures. The legal framework governing this program was developed over a period of 5 years and includes safeguards that go far beyond anything required for conventional intelligence operations. The technology cannot be used on American citizens without a warrant issued by a special court, and all international applications must comply with treaties that were negotiated specifically for neural intelligence gathering. Captain Kumar was examining the legal document with the careful attention of someone who understood that the devil was always in the details. These safeguards sound comprehensive, but how do we know they'll be enforced? How do we know this technology won't eventually be used for purposes we never intended? Sarah's expression became deeply personal, as if the question touched on something fundamental to her identity. Captain, I've spent 15 years of my life developing this technology. I've seen what it can do, both the tremendous benefits and the terrifying dangers. I've also seen what our enemies are doing with their crude versions of these same capabilities. She moved to the window where Major Reeves had stood earlier, looking out at the base where thousands of soldiers were preparing for missions that might take them into contact with enemy forces armed with memory extraction technology. The choice isn't between using this technology and not using it, Sarah continued. The choice is between developing it ourselves with proper safeguards and ethical oversight, or allowing our enemies to maintain an advantage that could cost thousands of American lives. She turned back to face the 3 officers, her eyes reflecting a burden of knowledge that went far beyond what she had shared in this room. I've accessed the memories of soldiers who died under enemy memory extraction. I've experienced their final moments, felt their pain, witnessed their courage as they tried to resist techniques that no human training could prepare them for. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of moral complexity. Each of the 3 officers was struggling with the implications of what they were being asked to join, a program that could save lives, but also represented a fundamental change in the nature of human conflict. Major Reeves spoke first, her voice steady but thoughtful. If we agree to join this program, what happens to our current assignments? What about our families, our existing obligations? Sarah consulted her tablet again. Major, your transition would be gradual over a period of 6 months. Your current position would be filled by someone who has been training for this eventuality for over a year. Your family would receive substantial financial benefits, advanced security protections, and access to medical care that includes psychological support for the unique stresses of neural intelligence work. She looked at each of them in turn. All of your families would need to undergo security screenings and sign confidentiality agreements, but they would also become part of a support network that understands the challenges of this type of classified work. Morrison had been quiet during this exchange, but now he stepped forward with the bearing of someone who had made a decision. Ms. Chun, before we can agree to anything, I need to know about failure scenarios. What happens if this technology falls into the wrong hands? What are the worst-case implications if our safeguards fail or our security is compromised? Sarah's expression became grave as she prepared to reveal the most terrifying aspects of the technology she had spent her career developing. Colonel, the worst-case scenario is that memory extraction technology becomes widely available to terrorist groups, criminal organizations, or totalitarian governments. In that scenario, privacy becomes meaningless, resistance becomes impossible, and democratic institutions could be destroyed from within. She activated her tablet and projected a series of scenarios onto the wall, each one more disturbing than the last. Imagine terrorists who can extract the memories of captured civilians to identify government employees and their families. Imagine criminal organizations that can steal corporate secrets, personal passwords, and family information directly from their victims' minds. Imagine authoritarian regimes that can identify dissidents, resistance members, and anyone who has ever had a disloyal thought. The scenarios painted a picture of a world where mental privacy was extinct, where thoughts themselves became weapons, and where the very concept of individual consciousness was under assault. Captain Kumar stared at the projections with growing horror. How do we prevent that from happening? Sarah's answer was simple, but carried enormous implications. We establish dominance in this technology before anyone else can fully develop it. We create international treaties and enforcement mechanisms while we still have the advantage. And we prepare defenses that can protect human consciousness from the kinds of attacks that are already being developed by our enemies. She turned off the projection and faced the three officers directly. Gentlemen and lady, the age of neural warfare has already begun. The only question is whether America will lead the development of defensive capabilities or find itself defending against technologies it doesn't understand. The room fell silent as each of the three officers contemplated a decision that would change not only their careers, but potentially the course of human history. They were being asked to join a program that could revolutionize intelligence gathering and save countless lives, but they were also being asked to help develop technologies that could fundamentally alter the nature of human privacy and free will. Colonel Morrison looked at his two subordinates, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their faces. The decisions they made in the next few minutes would echo through the rest of their careers, and possibly through the rest of human history. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming, but so was the weight of the alternative, allowing America's enemies to gain an insurmountable advantage in the emerging field of neural warfare. The weight of silence in the briefing room had become almost unbearable. Colonel Morrison found himself staring at the wall map, but his eyes weren't focusing on the marked territories or strategic positions. Instead, his mind was racing through decades of military service, trying to reconcile everything he thought he knew about warfare with the reality that Sarah Chun had revealed. Morrison had commanded troops in 3 different conflicts, had made life-and-death decisions that affected thousands of soldiers, and had always believed that the hardest choices were about tactics and sacrifice. Now he was facing a decision that went far beyond military strategy. He was being asked to help shape the future of human consciousness itself. Major Reeves had returned to her seat, but her posture was different now. The demonstration of memory sharing had changed something fundamental in her understanding of privacy and vulnerability. She kept touching her temples where the neural interface had been placed, as if she could still feel the device reading her thoughts. "Sarah," she said, using the first name for the first time, "I need to understand something. When you accessed those memories from Colonel Webb, from the other soldiers who died, did you experience their deaths? Did you feel what they felt in their final moments?" Sarah's expression became haunted, and, for the first time since entering the room, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "Major, accessing the memories of the deceased is different from working with living subjects. Death memories are incomplete, fragmented, often traumatic in ways that can't be fully prepared for." She sat down across from Reeves, her professional demeanor giving way to something more personal. "But, yes, I experienced portions of their deaths. Not the physical pain, but the emotional reality. The fear, the regret, the final thoughts about families they would never see again. It's part of why the psychological support for neural intelligence personnel is so extensive." Captain Kumar had been studying the legal documents Sarah had provided, and he looked up with a deeply troubled expression. "These safeguards you've outlined, they're impressive, but they're also based on the assumption that this technology will remain under the control of democratic governments with functioning legal systems. What happens when authoritarian regimes develop their own versions? What happens when the technology becomes advanced enough to be portable, undetectable, or even self-replicating? Sarah nodded grimly. Captain, those are exactly the scenarios that keep me awake at night. Our intelligence suggests that at least 5 nations are actively working on neural interface technology, and 3 of them have governments that wouldn't hesitate to use it against their own citizens. She activated her tablet and displayed a world map with colored regions indicating different levels of neural technology development. China has been investing heavily in brain-computer interface research under the guise of medical applications. Russia has been conducting human experiments that violate every international treaty on medical ethics. North Korea has been attempting to acquire our researchers through kidnapping and industrial espionage. The map painted a disturbing picture of a world racing toward neural warfare capabilities with varying degrees of ethical constraint. Some nations were bound by democratic institutions and legal oversight, while others operated with no limitations except technological capability. Morrison studied the map with the strategic eye of someone who had spent his career anticipating enemy capabilities. How much time do we have before this technology becomes widely available? Sarah's answer was immediate and chilling. Colonel, based on current development rates, we estimate that crude memory extraction technology could be available to terrorist organizations within 5 years. More sophisticated systems could be in the hands of hostile governments within 10 years. The window for establishing international controls and defensive capabilities is closing rapidly. She highlighted several regions on the map where terrorist organizations were known to operate. The materials needed for basic neural interface technology are becoming increasingly available through commercial sources. The computing power required for memory processing is now within reach of well-funded criminal organizations. The only current limitation is the expertise needed to design and implement the systems. Captain Kumar was taking notes as Sarah spoke, his engineering background helping him understand the technical progression she was describing. What about detection and countermeasures? If someone is using memory extraction technology, are there ways to identify it or prevent it? Sarah smiled for the first time in several minutes, and there was genuine excitement in her expression. Captain, that's one of the most promising aspects of our research. We've developed neural monitoring systems that can detect unauthorized access attempts and even trace them back to their source. She removed another device from her briefcase, this one resembling a small medallion or piece of jewelry. This is a neural security monitor. It's designed to be worn continuously and can detect any attempt to access the wearer's memories without authorization. It can also trigger defensive protocols that scramble neural patterns temporarily, preventing successful extraction. Morrison examined the device carefully, noting its lightweight construction and unobtrusive appearance. How effective is it against the technology our enemies are currently using? Sarah's expression became carefully neutral. Colonel, our testing suggests it's highly effective against known enemy systems. However, the technology is evolving rapidly on all sides. What protects against today's threats may not be sufficient against tomorrow's capabilities. She paused, and her next words carried a weight that made all 3 officers pay closer attention. Which brings us to the most critical aspect of this program. We're not just developing technology to extract memories, we're developing technology to protect them. The ultimate goal is to create neural sovereignty, the ability of individuals and nations to control access to their own cognitive processes. Major Reeves leaned forward, her intelligence background helping her understand the strategic implications. You're talking about mental borders, cognitive territory that can be defended just like physical territory. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Exactly, Major. Just as nations control their airspace and territorial waters, we're working toward the ability to control cognitive space. The technology we're developing could eventually allow individuals to grant or deny access to their memories on a granular level. She activated a complex diagram showing neural pathways with what appear to be security checkpoints and access controls. Imagine being able to compartmentalize your memories so that even if capture and torture occur, certain information remains absolutely inaccessible. Imagine soldiers who can share tactical information with their units while keeping strategic secrets completely protected. Captain Kumar was studying the diagram with growing amazement. This isn't just about memory extraction anymore. You're describing the ability to fundamentally restructure human consciousness. Sarah's expression became very serious. Captain, that's exactly why the ethical oversight is so critical. The technology we're developing could enhance human cognitive capabilities in ways that have never been possible before. But it could also be used to control, manipulate, or destroy the very essence of what makes us human. She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the base where soldiers were conducting routine training exercises, unaware that their fundamental understanding of mental privacy and security was about to be revolutionized. The choice we're making today, Sarah continued, isn't just about military technology or national security. It's about the future of human consciousness. Do we develop these capabilities with careful ethical oversight and democratic control, or do we allow less scrupulous actors to shape the development of neural warfare technologies? Morrison had been listening to this conversation with growing understanding of the magnitude of what they were being asked to join. This wasn't just another classified military program. It was potentially the most significant development in human history since the discovery of language or writing. Sarah, Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of command but also the weight of genuine concern, I need to ask you a direct question. Have you ever used this technology for purposes other than the ones you've described to us today? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Sarah's response would determine whether the three officers could trust her with their careers and possibly their lives. Sarah turned back from the window and faced Morrison directly. Colonel, the complete answer to that question is classified beyond your current security level. But I can tell you that every application of this technology has been authorized through proper channels and conducted under strict ethical oversight. It wasn't a denial, and Morrison recognized the careful phrasing of someone who was bound by multiple levels of classification and security protocols. But it also wasn't a confirmation of anything that would violate his personal ethical boundaries. Major Reeves had been processing the conversation from a different perspective, and she raised a concern that went to the heart of their decision. Sarah, you've shown us the potential benefits of this technology, and you've warned us about the dangers of not developing it ourselves. But what you haven't addressed is the possibility that developing it at all, regardless of who controls it, might be a mistake for humanity. Sarah's expression became thoughtful, and she took several moments before responding. Major, that's the most important question you could ask, and it's one that I wrestle with every day. The technology we've developed has the potential to eliminate privacy, to make resistance impossible, to fundamentally alter what it means to be human. She moved back to the table and sat down, her posture reflecting the weight of ethical responsibility she carried. But the technology also exists. The knowledge exists. The research has been conducted, and the capabilities have been demonstrated. The question isn't whether neural interface technology will exist, it's who will control it and how it will be used. She looked at each of them directly. I believe that if democratic nations with strong ethical frameworks don't take the lead in developing these capabilities, then authoritarian regimes and terrorist organizations will shape their development instead. I believe that the best way to prevent the worst-case scenarios is to ensure that the good actors in this field maintain technological superiority. Captain Kumar had been taking notes throughout the conversation, and he looked up with a question that addressed their immediate decision. If we agree to join this program, what's our first assignment? What would we actually be doing in the short term? Sarah consulted her tablet again. Captain, your immediate assignment would be to oversee the deployment of neural security systems for high-value personnel. We have a list of approximately 200 individuals, military leaders, intelligence operatives, government officials, who are at high risk for capture and memory extraction by enemy forces. She touched the screen, and a list of names appeared, many of which the three officers recognized as senior leaders in various branches of government and military service. Each of these individuals would receive neural protection systems and training in cognitive security techniques. The program would be implemented over a period of 18 months, starting with the highest priority targets. Morrison studied the list with growing understanding of the scope of the program they were being invited to join. The names represented the core leadership of American national security, people whose memories contained information that could compromise operations around the world. What about our families? Morrison asked. If we join this program, are they at risk? Could they become targets for enemies trying to access our memories indirectly? Sarah's expression became very serious. Colonel, that's an excellent question, and one that we've spent considerable time addressing. Family members of neural intelligence personnel receive comprehensive security protection, including neural security monitoring and, if they consent, limited cognitive protection systems. She removed another document from her briefcase, this one outlining family security protocols. Spouses and children over the age of 18 can volunteer for neural security systems that would protect them from memory extraction attempts. The technology is completely non-invasive and doesn't affect normal cognitive function in any way. Major Reeves had been studying the family security protocols with the attention of someone who understood that personal safety was often more important than professional success. What about children? What kind of protection can be provided for dependents who are too young to consent to neural interface technology? Sarah's response reflected careful consideration of ethical and practical concerns. Major, children of neural intelligence personnel receive enhanced physical security protection and monitoring, but we don't use any neural interface technology on minors under any circumstances. The long-term effects on developing brains are unknown, and the ethical implications are too significant to justify the risk. She paused, and her expression became more personal. However, I should mention that families involved in this program report very high levels of satisfaction with the security and support they receive. The children often perform better in school due to access to advanced educational resources, and the families develop close relationships with others who understand the unique challenges of classified work. Morrison had been weighing all of the information they had received, considering the strategic implications, the ethical concerns, and the personal costs of joining such a program. Now, he stood up and faced his two subordinates directly. Patricia, David, he said, using their first names to emphasize the personal nature of what he was about to say, I want both of you to understand that whatever decision you make about this program will have my full support. This isn't a military order or a career expectation. This is a choice that each of us has to make based on our own values and our own understanding of what's best for our country and our families. He looked at each of them carefully before continuing. I also want you to know that I'm going to accept Sarah's offer to join this program. I believe that the technology is real, that the threats are genuine, and that America needs people with integrity and ethical grounding to help guide the development of these capabilities. Major Reeves and Captain Kumar exchanged glances, both surprised by Morrison's directness, but not entirely unexpected given his leadership style and his obvious wrestling with the implications of what they had learned. Reeves spoke first. Colonel, if you're joining the program, then I am too. The memory sharing demonstration showed me that this technology is real and that it could save lives. The idea that our enemies are already using crude versions of it against our people makes the decision clear for me. Captain Kumar was quiet for several more moments before speaking. I'm concerned about the long-term implications, about the potential for abuse, about what this technology might lead to 20 or 30 years from now. But I'm more concerned about what happens if we let our enemies develop it without proper competition and oversight. He looked directly at Sarah. I'll join the program, but I want to be involved in developing the safeguards and ethical protocols. I want to help ensure that this technology is used responsibly. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked genuinely relieved. Thank you all. I know this wasn't an easy decision, and I want you to know that your concerns and your ethical perspectives will be essential to the success of this program. She began packing away the material she had brought for the demonstration, her movements more relaxed now that the recruitment phase was complete. Your first briefing as members of the Neural Intelligence Command will take place next Monday at a facility that doesn't officially exist. You'll receive travel instructions tomorrow morning along with new security clearances and access codes. Morrison had one final question. Sarah, how many other teams like ours are you recruiting? How large is this program going to be? Sarah's smile became slightly mysterious. Colonel, the answer to that question will be part of your first official briefing as program members. Let's just say that what we've discussed today is only the beginning of what you'll be learning about the future of human consciousness and American national security. 6 months after that life-changing meeting in the Fort Harrison briefing room, Colonel Morrison stood in a facility that officially didn't exist, watching the impossible become routine. The Neural Intelligence Command headquarters was built 300 feet beneath a nondescript office building in Virginia. its existence known only to a select few individuals with security clearances that required congressional approval to access. The transformation in Morrison's understanding of warfare and technology had been gradual but profound. What had begun as skepticism about Sarah Chen's claims had evolved into a deep appreciation for the complexity and potential of neural interface technology. More importantly, it had given him insight into threats that most military leaders couldn't even imagine. Major Patricia Reeves had adapted to her new role as head of the Memory Intelligence Division with the same competence she had shown throughout her career. But the work had changed her in ways that were both subtle and significant. The ability to access and analyze memories from deceased soldiers had provided unprecedented intelligence about enemy operations, but it had also given her an intimate understanding of the cost of war that few people could comprehend. Standing beside a bank of sophisticated monitoring equipment, Reeves reviewed the latest intelligence gathered from memory extraction operations. The data was both strategically valuable and deeply personal, containing not just tactical information, but the human experiences of soldiers who had given their lives for their country. The latest extraction from Sergeant Williams's memories has revealed 3 previously unknown weapons caches, Reeves reported to Morrison. More importantly, his experiences during capture show that enemy forces are using a new form of interrogation technology that appears to be more advanced than what we previously detected. Morrison studied the report with growing concern. Even as their own neural intelligence capabilities had advanced, their enemies were clearly not standing still. The technological arms race in cognitive warfare was accelerating beyond what anyone had anticipated. Captain David Kumar had embraced his role as head of the technology integration team with an enthusiasm that sometimes surprised his colleagues. His initial concerns about the ethical implications of neural interface technology had evolved into a determination to ensure that American capabilities remained ahead of potential threats while maintaining appropriate safeguards. Kumar's team had successfully deployed neural security systems to over 100 high-value personnel, creating the world's first cognitive protection network for military and intelligence leaders. The technology was invisible to casual observation, but provided unprecedented security against memory extraction attempts. The latest field tests show that our neural protection systems are effective against all known enemy extraction techniques, Kumar reported during their weekly briefing. However, we're detecting attempts to probe our defenses using methods that suggest enemy technology is evolving more rapidly than our initial assessments indicated. Sarah Chun had become more than just the recruiter who had brought them into this program. As the chief scientific officer for neural intelligence operations, she had proven to be both a brilliant researcher and a thoughtful leader who understood the weight of ethical responsibility that came with such powerful technology. Sarah's own evolution had been perhaps the most dramatic of all. The confident academic who had walked into that first meeting had been replaced by someone who carried the weight of humanity's first steps into the realm of consciousness manipulation. The technology she had helped create was being used to save lives and protect national security, but it was also opening doors to possibilities that kept her awake at night. We've received authorization to begin Phase 3 of the Cognitive Enhancement Program, Sarah announced during a classified briefing attended only by Morrison, Reeves, Kumar, and 3 individuals whose identities were protected by the highest levels of security classification. Phase 3 represented a quantum leap in neural interface capabilities. Where previous phases had focused on memory extraction and protection, Phase 3 involved the direct enhancement of human cognitive abilities. Soldiers could be given perfect memory, accelerated learning capabilities, and even shared consciousness that allowed unprecedented coordination between units. Morrison listened to Sarah's presentation with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The military applications were extraordinary, but the implications for human society were staggering. They were moving beyond simply protecting and accessing memories into the realm of fundamentally altering what it meant to be human. The test subjects for Phase 3 have all volunteered and have undergone extensive psychological evaluation, Sarah continued. The enhancements are reversible and have shown no negative side effects in laboratory testing. However, we're moving into completely uncharted territory regarding the long-term implications. The volunteers were members of elite special forces units who had been carefully selected for their psychological stability and their understanding of the experimental nature of the program. They would become the first human beings to experience artificially enhanced consciousness, pioneers in a new frontier of human capability. Reeves had been studying the psychological profiles of the volunteers, and she raised a concern that went to the heart of the ethical challenges they faced. Sarah, these enhancements would give individuals capabilities that are fundamentally different from normal human consciousness. What happens when the mission is complete? How do we handle the psychological adjustment of returning to normal cognitive function? Sarah's expression reflected the gravity of the question. Patricia, that's one of the most complex challenges we're facing. Our research suggests that individuals who experience enhanced consciousness may find normal human cognitive function limiting and frustrating. We're developing support protocols to help with the transition, but we're essentially creating a new category of psychological experience. Kumar had been analyzing the technical specifications for the cognitive enhancement systems, and he identified a concern that had strategic implications. The computing power required for these enhancements is enormous. If our enemies detect the energy signatures or the electromagnetic emissions from our enhanced personnel, they could potentially identify and target individuals who have received the treatments. Sarah nodded grimly. David, that's exactly why we're limiting Phase 3 to a small number of volunteers for specialized missions. The technology isn't ready for wide deployment, and the security risks are significant. But the potential advantages in critical situations could be decisive. Morrison had been considering the broader implications of their work, and he posed a question that had been troubling him for weeks. Sarah, we've been developing these capabilities to counter enemy threats and to protect American interests. But what happens when this technology becomes widely available? What happens when enhanced consciousness becomes commercially accessible? Sarah was quiet for several moments before responding. Colonel, that's the question that defines the next phase of human history. We estimate that basic cognitive enhancement technology could become commercially available within 20 years. More advanced systems might be accessible to wealthy individuals within 30 years. She activated a projection showing potential future scenarios, each more complex than the last. We could be looking at a world where cognitive ability is determined by economic resources, where enhanced individuals become a separate class of humanity, where normal human consciousness becomes obsolete. The scenarios painted pictures of societies stratified by cognitive capability, where enhanced individuals possessed advantages so significant that they could dominate politics, economics, and social structures. The implications for democracy, human rights, and social justice were profound. Reeves studied the projections with growing alarm. We could be creating the technological foundation for a permanent aristocracy based on cognitive enhancement rather than inherited wealth. Kumar's engineering background helped him see the technical progression that could make such scenarios inevitable. Once the technology exists and becomes commercially viable, market forces will drive rapid advancement and widespread adoption. The only way to prevent cognitive stratification might be to ensure that enhancement technology remains under government control. Morrison recognized the fundamental challenge they were facing. Military technology had always eventually found civilian applications, but neural interface technology represented a different category of advancement. They weren't just creating new weapons or defensive systems. They were creating tools that could fundamentally alter human nature itself. Sarah, Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility, I need to know about the global implications of what we're developing. Are other nations working on similar programs? What's the international response to neural interface technology? Sarah consulted her classified briefing materials before responding. Colonel, at least 12 nations have active neural interface research programs. China and Russia are investing heavily in military applications, while European nations are focusing primarily on medical and civilian uses. The international community is just beginning to grapple with a need for treaties and regulations governing cognitive enhancement technology. She highlighted several regions on a world map where neural interface research was advancing rapidly. The challenge is that unlike nuclear weapons or chemical weapons, neural interface technology has enormous beneficial applications in treating mental illness, enhancing education, and improving quality of life. Creating international restrictions that prevent military abuse while allowing beneficial development is